Hello YouTube, Old Man Dan here. I'm trying to get this set up to where I can film this real quick, without editing, without interruptions, whatever. It's kind of hard. I'm sitting on the porch here with my puppies. I guess I'm going to screw this up just a second. There's my puppies, my bulldogs, my pirate crew. I don't know where Panela went. She's not visible right now, but so anyway, we're just enjoying some front porch lifestyle here on Memorial Day, and I wanted to shoot this quick video to tell you what Memorial Day means to me. Up until about 5 years ago, Memorial Day was a very difficult day for me. It's not easy yet, but it's gotten easier over the last couple of years. I know people who have given their lives in the service of this country going back to 1983 and the Beirut bombing. You don't need to bark at the neighbors, Morgan. Don't bark at the neighbors. I'm trying to film. Hey. Guys, they're just walking on the street. There's nothing to bark about. Oh well. My neighbor's out doing something in his yard now, and I got people walking on the street, so the puppies are going to be crazy. Anyway, back to what I was trying to say, okay? So, since 1983 and the Beirut fiasco, I've known people, personally known people who have given their life in the service of their country. The one individual I'd like to tell you a little bit about today was a Corporal Bennett. He died during Desert Shield. That's important to me because for those of you that haven't realized it, we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of Desert Storm, Desert Shield. So Desert Storm started in late summer of 1990. At that time, I was deployed with Weapons Company, 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, as part of a Marine Expeditionary Unit, and me and the mortar platoon I was a part of were on the USS Ogden. We were in Hong Kong the day Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. We had a whole big plan. We were going to go to Hong Kong. We were going to go get drunk with the British Royal Marines. We were going to go buy fine china to send home to Mama and Daddy and wives and girlfriends. We were going to eat out in Kowloon. Just all kinds of crazy plans. And it got interrupted by Saddam Hussein invading Kuwait. So in the hotels everywhere, all through Hong Kong, the Marine Expeditionary Unit and the Amphibious Ready Group, the group of ships we were on, sent out people called Shore Patrol, and they even had the news run banners on news programs, whatever, to tell all the Marines and sailors to get back to ship because we were leaving. So, holiday fun interrupted, we get back on ship, and the first thing we do is we go to Okinawa, where on a group of ships designed to carry a battalion of Marines, a logistics support group, and the helicopters and airplanes designed to support us, one battalion. We crammed a whole nother battalion, 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, and we headed for the Gulf. So we were tied up with Desert Storm pretty much from August till the end of Desert Shield. We were tied up with Desert Shield pretty much till the end of Desert Storm, with one small exception where we sent a couple of ships to support an operation in Somalia and we sent a couple of ships, including my ship, back to the Philippines because of a threat against the U.S. Embassy in Manila. And then we went right back to the Gulf region. The only thing good that came out of going to the Philippines for us, other than the fact that we did actually get to drink a few beers, was that we missed out on all of the sea soldier operations. There were amphibious training operations designed to fool Saddam Hussein into thinking the main assault was going to be an amphibious assault. So we did take part in one sea soldier operation. I think it was Sea Soldier 4, where we did this huge regimental-sized amphibious landing in Oman. And then we were back in the Gulf. Now, while we were in the Gulf, the Force Reconnaissance Marines that were attached to our Marine Expeditionary Unit and the Navy SEALs that were attached to the Amphibious Ready Group did search and seizures, or search, board, and visits, SBV operations on Iraqi ships and on ships headed to Iraq to enforce the embargo that President Bush had put on them. So they were busy the whole time. We were also in the area where the Iraqis had released a whole bunch of mines in the ocean, into the Persian Gulf. And we were only about a nautical mile away from one of the ships when it hit a mine. And one of the ships was an amphibious ship, and a couple of the people killed by that mine were Marines. They weren't Marines that I knew, but they were Marines that were they're part of the same big organization and operation that we were doing. Some of the other things that 1-4 did during Desert Shield and prior to the kickoff of Desert Storm was take down the islands from which Iraq was launching missiles, from which Iraq was launching the mines into the ocean, and on which they were setting up missiles to attack our shipping when it came north. Now, we had a big plan to on D-Day, we were supposed to actually land on Maritime Island. Maritime Island is a really large island off the coast of Kuwait that is a tourist or a rich people playground for Kuwaitis. The Iraqi Naval Infantry Brigade had taken it over and fortified it, and they were going to use it as a base to attack our ships, use artillery, etc., against our ships when we came up to do the amphibious attack. We were going to take Maritime Island, and we had plans to push further from Maritime Island in towards the mouth of the Gulf and actually land in Iraq if things were needed to put pressure on Saddam's army in Kuwait to force them to surrender. But what happened was everything went so fast, the Marines progressed so fast, that we basically never had to do our landing. So as the helicopters were coming in to do the pre-landing fire support against the beaches, the Iraqis on the island started waving flags, white flags. So they called off the attack runs, and we transitioned from doing an amphibious assault to basically a unopposed landing and corralling all these Iraqi naval infantry who were ready to surrender. And then from there, we just helped collect prisoners, and we stayed in the Gulf until I want to say late February, maybe a little bit later. I don't know. It's all a blur now. It was 30 years ago. So anyway, that was my experience during Desert Storm, Desert Shield. But while we were at sea, while we were in the Gulf, um, there was another battle where a lot of Marines were involved, and where one of my good friends, Corporal Bennett, was killed. Corporal Bennett had been a mortarman in Fox Company 2-1. He had come up for re-enlistment, and he wanted to know what to do. And at that point, LAR, Light Armored Reconnaissance, was a big push in the Marine Corps. They had bought the LAV 25s and several other variants from the Canadians, and they were forming these Light Armored Reconnaissance battalions. And the concept was only a couple years old, but they really needed people to go into LAR so they could flush out the units with NCOs and junior officers. So Headquarters Marine Corps offered Bennett a bonus to go into, to transition from being a regular infantryman to being a light armored reconnaissance infantryman. And he did. So he re-enlisted, he went to school, he learned how to operate the LAVs and the change in tactics that were needed if you went transition from a regular infantry battalion to an LAR unit. And then he was with 1st LAR when they deployed to the Gulf. Well, when we were first getting into Kuwait, not into Kuwait, but first getting into Saudi Arabia, the big concern was if Saddam tried to invade the oil fields in Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia's forces were not strong enough, were not big enough to have prevented Saddam from invading and taking over those northern oil fields inside Saudi Arabia. So that was the responsibility given to the 1st Marine units to get into Saudi Arabia, was to defend the border of Saudi Arabia and to defend those oil fields against a Iraqi invasion. So they pushed towards the border, the Iraqis pushed towards the border, and there was a fairly large fight that developed. Many Marine units. We were on alert, we never flew in, but we were standing by on ship to fly in as reinforcements if needed. And units from the 7th Marines, 1st LAR, 3rd Reconnaissance, etc. were involved. And they were just outside this town called Khafji. The fight was pretty big. In fact, to tell you how big it was, I later knew a anti-tank missileman from 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, maybe 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. Anyway, the 7th Marines tow gunner, anti-tankman, who got a Bronze Star for shooting tanks. A couple of the tanks he shot and killed, he shot them inside the minimum arming distance for the tow missile. So the tow missile was supposed to launch from the launcher, go travel 100 meters down range before it arms itself. But he shot 2 tanks, like back to back, basically hip shooting them, loading the missile, turning the launcher, and squeezing the trigger. And it was confirmed that at least one of those tanks was inside that 100 meter arming range. Anyway, he got the Bronze Star that day because he killed, I think it was 7 tanks. I don't remember now, 6 or 7 tanks, like in a matter of minutes. And I knew another guy. Anyway, that was Staff Sergeant Chris, and I worked with him when we were both drill instructors at Officer Candidate School in Virginia. And then there was Sergeant Davis. He was from 3rd Recon, and he got a Silver Star directing air attacks against the Iraqi forces that day. Him and his patrol were out in front, basically deep in, I won't say real deep, I don't know how deep, but in in Kuwait, and as the Iraqi forces were pushing down towards Khafji, he directed airstrikes all day. And then him and his team were compromised, and they had to flee across the desert, extract across the desert. And basically, because of all the fighting going on, they couldn't send any helicopters to pick him up, so they had to hoof it to get back to safety. And he got the Silver Star for that. That's how big a battle it was. Anyway, my buddy, Corporal Bennett, he was there. He was in he was with the LAR unit that was in the middle of that fight, and somebody called in an A-10, Air Force A-10, and I'll never know whether it was the fault of the ground controller or the fault of the pilot or a combination of errors. But anyway, that Air Force A-10 destroyed Corporal Bennett's LAV-2, and him and the crew of that LAV-2, I'm sorry, LAV-25. Him and the crew of that LAV were killed by that A-10. So it was one of those cases of mistaken identity, or, you know, like I said, I'll never know. Did the Air Force pilot mistake the LAV for an Iraqi vehicle? Did the controller that told him where to attack make a mistake? I don't know. It really doesn't matter. I don't hold anybody at fault. It's one of those sad situations that tend to happen. People hear about friendly fire all the time. It's in movies, etc. People hear about the fog of war. It's a real thing. It happens. Like I said, I don't hold a grudge against the Air Force and their A-10 pilots. I don't hold a grudge against the ground controller. I just hold the memory of Corporal Bennett and all the good times we had together when we were in 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines together. Times when we were out on the ranges, times when we were on ship together, times when we were sitting around in the Philippines drinking beer or whatever. So I'll always remember Corporal Bennett, and he'll always be one of many people I think about on Memorial Day. Now, I'm going to finish this up, and I hope you don't take this to be rude or whatever. It's just something I would like to try to communicate. Okay. Up to several years ago, I would get irate. I would get furious if somebody would tell me, "Thank you for your service on Memorial Day." I would try not to be an ass and cuss them out or say nothing rude or nothing, but the thing to me is that Memorial Day isn't the day to thank a veteran for their service. Memorial Day is the day to find those families who've had loved ones who've given their life in service and do something for them. At a minimum, tell them that you feel their loss, that you're sorry for their loss, that you appreciate the sacrifice of their loved ones. If you want to thank a veteran, thank them on Veterans Day. That's in November. And I'll tell you more about how I feel about thank you for your service on Veterans Day, maybe. But anyway, today's Veterans Day. Hopefully nobody will tell me, nobody has yet, but maybe nobody will tell me Happy Memorial Day. Because for me, today is not a day about being happy. Today is a day about remembering guys like Corporal Bennett who gave their lives for your country. Thank you.